In the grand corridors of Windsor Castle, where centuries of royal history echo through marble halls, even the youngest members of the royal family are not immune to the simple, heart-wrenching emotions that make us all human. What happened on that quiet Tuesday afternoon would remind the world that beneath the crowns and ceremony, a child's love for their mother remains the purest force of all. When 5-year-old Prince Louis heard a familiar voice echoing through the castle's ancient walls, his small heart began to race with hope and confusion. For 3 long weeks, he had been asking the same question that would soon bring tears to the eyes of even the most stoic royal guards. Is that you, Mummy? This is the story of a moment that captured the delicate balance between royal duty and a mother's love, witnessed by those sworn to protect the crown, but moved to tears by the innocent voice of a child who simply wanted his mother back. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine gardens of Windsor Castle, as Guard Sergeant James Mitchell took his position outside the children's wing. 23 years of service to the crown had prepared him for many things, but nothing quite like the past 3 weeks. The usually vibrant corridors, which typically echoed with the laughter and playful shouts of Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, had taken on a somber quality that seemed to seep into the very stones of the ancient walls. Prince William walked past with measured steps, his usual warm demeanor replaced by something more guarded, more careful. The weight of recent events had settled heavily on his shoulders, and even the children seemed to sense that something fundamental had shifted in their world. Mitchell had watched the Prince of Wales struggle to maintain normalcy for his children while dealing with circumstances that would challenge any parent, royal or otherwise. The Princess of Wales had been absent from the castle for nearly 3 weeks now, and while the official statement spoke of scheduled commitments and royal duties, those within the inner circle knew the truth was far more complex. Catherine had been dealing with personal health matters that required her full attention and had necessitated a temporary but significant change in the family's daily routine. The decision had not been made lightly, and the impact on the children was becoming increasingly apparent with each passing day. Prince Louis, the youngest at 5 years old, had been particularly affected by his mother's absence. Unlike his older siblings, who had a better understanding of royal obligations and the sometimes demanding nature of their parents' roles, Louis operated purely on emotion and instinct. His world had always revolved around the comforting presence of his mother, her gentle voice reading bedtime stories, her warm hugs after a difficult day, and her patient explanations when the world seemed too big and confusing for a small boy to understand. Mitchell remembered the first few days after the princess's departure. Louis had been unusually quiet, often found sitting by the large windows that overlooked the castle's main approach, his small face pressed against the glass as he watched every car that entered the grounds. The boy's nanny, Maria Santos, had tried her best to maintain his routine, but even she couldn't fill the particular void that Catherine's absence had created. The other staff members had noticed the change too. Mrs. Fall Henderson, the head housekeeper who had served the royal family for over 15 years, mentioned how Prince Louis had stopped asking for his favorite afternoon snacks. Chef Morrison reported that the boy barely touched his meals, even when they prepared his most beloved dishes. The castle's librarian, Miss Thompson, shared that Louis no longer showed interest in the story sessions that had been a highlight of his daily routine. Prince William had done everything within his power to compensate for Catherine's absence. He rearranged his schedule to spend more time with the children, taking them on special outings and creating new traditions to help them adapt. But even his efforts, sincere and loving as they were, couldn't completely ease the particular ache that Louis felt for his mother. There was something irreplaceable about a mother's touch, her unique way of making everything seem safe and right in the world. During the second week, Louis had begun asking the question that would haunt the castle staff. It started innocently enough, usually when he heard footsteps in the corridor or the sound of a car approaching. "Is that Mummy?" he would ask, his bright blue eyes filled with hope. When the answer was inevitably no, his small shoulders would slump in disappointment. But he never stopped asking. The question evolved as the days passed. Sometimes it was, "When will Mummy come home?" Or, "Why can't I see Mummy?" But most often, it was simply, "Is that you, Mummy?" called out whenever he thought he heard something that might signal her return. The innocence and longing in his voice had begun to affect even the most professional members of the staff, who prided themselves on maintaining appropriate emotional distance in their duties. Mitchell had witnessed many touching moments during his years of service, but watching Prince Louis cope with his mother's absence had been particularly difficult. The boy's routine had become increasingly centered around the possibility of his mother's return. He would position himself in locations where he could see the main entrance, and he had developed an uncanny ability to distinguish between different vehicles and footsteps, always hoping that the next sound would signal Catherine's homecoming. The castle's child psychologist, Dr. Sarah Williams, had been consulted to help the family navigate this challenging period. She explained that for a child of Louis's age, 3 weeks felt like an eternity, and his mother's absence could feel particularly confusing because it wasn't something he could easily understand or rationalize. Unlike adults, who could comprehend the complexities of royal duties and health matters, Louis operated from a place of pure emotional need. Dr. Williams had recommended maintaining as much routine as possible, while being honest with Louis about his mother's absence in age-appropriate terms. The family had explained that Mummy needed to take care of some important things, and that she loved him very much, but would be away for a little while longer. While Louis seemed to accept this explanation intellectually, his emotional response remained unchanged. The staff had rallied around the young prince in ways that went beyond their typical duties. Guard Mitchell found himself lingering a bit longer during his shifts, sometimes sharing stories of his own childhood, or pointing out interesting things happening in the gardens to distract Louis when the boy seemed particularly sad. The gardeners made sure to tend to the flower beds that Louis could see from his favorite window, creating colorful displays that might lift his spirits. Even the castle's resident corgis seemed to sense the change in atmosphere. They had begun spending more time near Louis, as if understanding that the young prince needed extra comfort during this difficult period. Queen Elizabeth's beloved dogs had always been particularly attuned to the emotional needs of the family members, and their presence provided some measure of solace to the lonely little boy. As the 3rd week began, Louis's behavior had become even more focused on his mother's potential return. He had started carrying around a small stuffed lion that Catherine had given him, clutching it tightly whenever he felt particularly overwhelmed by her absence. The toy had become his constant companion, a tangible connection to his mother that he could hold on to when the castle felt too big and empty. The other children, Prince George and Princess Charlotte, had been remarkably supportive of their younger brother, despite dealing with their own emotions about their mother's absence. George, at 11 years old, had taken on a protective role, often sitting with Louis during quiet moments, and sharing stories about their mother to keep her memory present and positive. Charlotte, wise beyond her 9 years, had been particularly gentle with Louis, helping him with activities and making sure he felt included in family moments. Prince William had been deeply moved by his children's resilience and their care for one another during this challenging time. He made sure to spend individual time with each child, understanding that they each processed their mother's absence differently and needed different types of support. With Louis, this often meant simply being present, allowing the boy to express his feelings without trying to fix or change them immediately. The anticipation of Catherine's return had been building throughout the castle for several days. While no official announcement had been made, there were subtle signs that suggested her homecoming was imminent. Additional security protocols had been quietly implemented. Household staff had been preparing special meals, and there was a general sense of expectation that hung in the air like morning mist over the Thames. Guard Mitchell had noticed these preparations and felt his own sense of anticipation growing. He had served during many royal homecomings, but few had carried the emotional weight of this particular return. The impact on Prince Louis had been profound, and Mitchell found himself hoping that the reunion would provide the healing and comfort that the young prince so desperately needed. As that Tuesday afternoon approached, with spring sunshine filtering through the ancient windows and the castle grounds awakening to new life, nobody could have predicted that the next few hours would create a moment so touching, so purely human, that it would remain etched in the memories of all who witnessed it. The stage was set for a reunion that would remind everyone present why family, above all else, remains the most precious treasure that even royalty can possess. Tuesday afternoon arrived with unseasonable warmth for early spring, and the castle seemed to hum with an energy that Guard Sergeant Mitchell couldn't quite define. He had been stationed outside the children's wing since early morning, and something felt different about this day. The household staff moved with purpose. There were additional security checks being conducted discreetly, and even the air seemed charged with anticipation. Prince Louis had spent most of the morning in his usual spot by the large window that overlooked the main courtyard. His small frame was curled up on the window seat, his stuffed lion pressed firmly against his chest, and his eyes fixed on the path that led to the main entrance. Maria Santos, his nanny, had tried several times to engage him in activities, but the boy seemed determined to maintain his vigil. "Master Lewis," Maria had said gently, "shall we go to the library today? Miss Thompson has some new books about adventures that you might enjoy." But Lewis had simply shaken his head, his gaze never leaving the window. "I want to wait for Mummy," he had whispered, his voice carrying that particular quality that children's voices have when they're trying very hard to be brave. Mitchell had overheard this exchange and felt his chest tighten with sympathy. In his 23 years of service, he had protected members of the royal family through countless situations, but protecting a child's heart from the pain of separation was not something his training had prepared him for. He found himself checking his watch more frequently than usual, hoping that whatever plans were in motion would unfold soon for the young prince's sake. The afternoon progressed slowly, with staff members going about their duties while maintaining an unusual level of alertness. Mitchell noticed additional personnel being positioned at various points throughout the castle, and communication devices were being checked and rechecked. These were all signs that suggested an important arrival was expected, though no official word had been given to the regular staff. Around 2 o'clock, Prince William appeared in the corridor, and Mitchell immediately noticed a change in the Prince of Wales's demeanor. The tension that had been evident in his shoulders for weeks seemed to have eased slightly, and there was something in his expression that suggested positive developments were imminent. He spoke briefly with Maria Santos, their conversation too quiet for Mitchell to overhear, but the nanny's face brightened considerably during their exchange. Prince William then approached his youngest son, who was still maintaining his patient watch by the window. Mitchell observed as the prince sat down beside Louis on the window seat, wrapping his arm around the boy's small shoulders. "How are you doing today, buddy?" he asked softly, and Louis looked up at his father with those bright blue eyes that seemed too wise for such a young face. "I'm waiting for Mummy Papa," Louis replied simply, as if this explained everything about his position and his purpose for the day. Prince William smiled, and Mitchell noticed that it was the first genuine smile he had seen from the prince in weeks. "I know you are, Louis, and I think your wait might be ending soon." The words hung in the air with significance that wasn't lost on anyone present. Louis's eyes widened slightly, and he sat up straighter, pressing his face closer to the window glass. "Really, Papa? Is Mummy really coming home today?" The hope in his voice was so pure and transparent that it seemed to illuminate the entire corridor. "We'll see, my boy. But I want you to know that Mummy has missed you every single day she's been away, and she's been counting the minutes until she could come home to you and your brother and sister." Prince William's words were carefully chosen, maintaining hope while not making promises that circumstances might not allow him to keep. As the afternoon continued, the energy within the castle continued to build. Mitchell noticed that communication between the security team leaders had increased significantly, and there were subtle movements of personnel that suggested a coordinated operation was beginning to unfold. Whatever was planned for the day was clearly important enough to warrant the highest levels of preparation and security. Around 3:30, Mitchell's radio crackled to life with a brief coded message that caused him to stand a little straighter. The message was simple but significant. Phoenix approaching nest. In the castle's security terminology, this meant that Princess Catherine was en route to Windsor. Mitchell felt his own pulse quicken as he realized that Prince Louis's long wait was indeed about to end. The young prince seemed to sense the change in atmosphere around him, even though no one had yet told him what was happening. Children often have an intuitive understanding of energy and emotion that adults sometimes lose, and Louis had clearly picked up on the subtle shifts in the behavior of those around him. He pressed his face more firmly against the window and tightened his grip on his stuffed lion. "Something's happening," he announced to no one in particular, his voice filled with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "I can feel it. Something good is happening." Maria Santos exchanged a meaningful glance with Prince William, and Mitchell saw the prince give a subtle nod that seemed to confirm the boy's intuition. As 4 o'clock approached, the castle's atmosphere had become almost electric with anticipation. Even the staff members who weren't directly involved in the day's arrangements seemed to sense that something significant was about to unfold. Mitchell positioned himself so that he could observe both the main approach to the castle and Prince Louis's reaction when the moment finally arrived. The first sign came as the distant sound of vehicles approaching the castle gates. The sound was still far enough away that most people wouldn't have noticed it, but Louis's head snapped up immediately, his entire body becoming alert and focused. "Cars, Papa! I hear cars!" he exclaimed, scrambling to get a better view out the window. Prince William moved closer to his son, and Mitchell could see the emotion building in the prince's face as well. This reunion had been long awaited by the entire family, but perhaps no one had anticipated it with the pure, uncomplicated longing that Louis had demonstrated every day for the past 3 weeks. The sound of the approaching convoy grew gradually louder, and with it, Louis's excitement became increasingly difficult to contain. He pressed both hands against the window glass and began speaking rapidly to his stuffed lion, telling it that Mummy was finally coming home and that everything was going to be wonderful again. The innocent joy in his voice was infectious, and Mitchell found himself smiling despite his professional training to remain stoic during such moments. As the vehicles drew closer to the main entrance, which was not yet visible from Louis's window position, the boy began to bounce slightly on his toes, his entire body vibrating with barely contained energy. "Is it her, Papa? Is it really Mummy this time?" he asked, his voice breathless with hope and anticipation. "Let's go see," Prince William said gently, taking his son's hand and beginning to lead him toward the main entrance hall. Mitchell followed at a discreet distance, his training automatically engaging to ensure the family's security, while recognizing that this was a moment that required sensitivity and space for intimate family emotions. As they walked through the corridors toward the main entrance, Louis's excitement continued to build. He chattered constantly to his father and to his stuffed lion, making plans for all the things he wanted to show his mother and tell her about from the time she had been away. The pure, unfiltered happiness radiating from the small boy was remarkable to witness, and Mitchell found himself hoping desperately that the reunion would live up to the child's enormous expectations. The sound of car doors closing could be heard echoing through the main entrance hall as they approached, and Louis began to move faster, practically pulling his father along with his eagerness. "Mummy," he began calling out, his voice carrying through the stone corridors with a clarity and joy that seemed to breathe new life into the ancient walls of Windsor Castle. Mitchell had witnessed many important arrivals during his years of service, but he sensed that what was about to unfold would be something special, something that would remind everyone present of the fundamental human emotions that unite all families, regardless of their station in life. The stage was set for a reunion that had been 3 weeks in the making, and the anticipation was almost overwhelming for everyone involved, but especially for one small prince who had never stopped believing that his mother would come home to him. The main entrance hall of Windsor Castle fell into a hushed anticipation as the sound of approaching footsteps echoed across the marble floors. Guard Sergeant Mitchell positioned himself at his designated post, but his attention was completely focused on Prince Louis, whose small hand was still firmly clasped in his father's, while his other arm clutched his stuffed lion with desperate hope. The ornate doors of the main entrance remained closed, but everyone present could sense movement beyond them. Security personnel had taken their positions with practiced efficiency, creating a protective perimeter that was both secure and unobtrusive. This was a family moment that happened to involve members of the royal family, and everyone understood the delicate balance required between duty and humanity. Prince Louis stood on his tiptoes, trying to see over and around the adults who surrounded him, his entire body practically vibrating with barely contained excitement. "Papa, why aren't the doors opening?" he whispered urgently, as if speaking too loudly might somehow prevent his mother from entering. "Is she really there? Are you sure it's Mummy?" Prince William knelt down to his son's level, his hands gently resting on the boy's shoulders. Mitchell could see the emotion building in the Prince of Wales' face as he looked into his youngest child's eyes, knowing that the next few moments would end weeks of difficult separation for all of them. "Yes, Louis, it's really Mummy. She's home." The words had barely left Prince William's lips when the sound they had all been waiting for finally reached them. Through the heavy oak doors came a voice that had been absent from the castle for what felt like an eternity, but which Louis recognized instantly despite the muffling effect of the wooden barrier. "Hello? Is anyone there? I'm home." The effect on Prince Louis was immediate and profound. His entire face transformed, lighting up with a joy so pure and complete that it seemed to illuminate the entire entrance hall. But then, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing, uncertainty crept into his expression. He had heard so many sounds over the past 3 weeks that had raised his hopes, only to disappoint him. Could this really be what he had been waiting for? "Is that you, Mummy?" he called out, his voice carrying across the entrance hall with a clarity and longing that seemed to penetrate the very stones of the castle walls. The question hung in the air for a moment that felt eternal, filled with all the hope and uncertainty that a 5-year-old heart could contain. The response came immediately, warm and unmistakable, carrying all the love and reassurance that Louis had been longing to hear. "Yes, my darling. It's me. I'm here." Mitchell watched as every ounce of doubt vanished from Prince Louis's face, replaced by an expression of pure, unbridled joy that was breathtaking to witness. The boy released his father's hand and his stuffed lion simultaneously, both falling as he began to run toward the doors that separated him from his mother. "Mummy! Mummy! You're really home." Louis's voice cracked with emotion as he reached the doors, his small fists pounding against the wood, as if he could somehow will them to open faster. The sound of his excitement was so infectious that even the most stoic members of the security team found themselves smiling. On the other side of the doors, Princess Catherine's voice could be heard clearly, filled with her own emotion and urgency. "I'm here, sweetheart. Open the doors, please. I need to see my boy." The request was directed at the security team, but it carried the authority and desperation of a mother who had been separated from her child for far too long. The head of security gave a subtle nod, and the ornate doors began to swing open slowly, revealing the figure that Louis had been dreaming about for 3 long weeks. Princess Catherine stood in the doorway, and even from his position across the hall, Mitchell could see that she had been just as affected by the separation as her youngest son. The princess looked radiant but tired, her face showing the signs of whatever challenges had kept her away, but also glowing with the anticipation of this reunion. She was dressed simply but elegantly, and her eyes were already filled with tears as she searched the entrance hall for her children. The moment Louis saw his mother, everything else in the world seemed to cease to exist. He ran toward her with all the speed his small legs could manage, his voice rising in a cry of pure happiness. "Mummy, you're really here. You're really, really here." Princess Catherine dropped to her knees just inside the doorway, her arms open wide to receive her son. The 3 weeks of separation seemed to collapse into nothing, as Louis launched himself into his mother's embrace, his small arms wrapping around her neck with a fierceness that spoke to how much he had missed her physical presence. "Oh, my sweet boy," Catherine whispered, her voice breaking with emotion as she held Louis close, one hand stroking his hair while the other pressed him firmly against her. "I missed you so much, darling. Every single day, every single minute. I thought about you constantly." Mitchell found himself deeply moved by the raw emotion of the reunion. In all his years of service, he had witnessed many significant moments, but there was something particularly powerful about watching a mother and child reconnect after a difficult separation. The love between them was so pure and uncomplicated that it seemed to transform the grand entrance hall into the most intimate space in the world. Prince Louis was speaking rapidly, his words tumbling over each other in his excitement to tell his mother everything that had happened during her absence. "Mummy, I waited for you every day. I looked out the window and I listened for your car, and I kept my lion safe for you to see, and Papa said you were thinking about me, and I never stopped hoping you would come home and—" "Slow down, sweetheart." Catherine laughed through her tears, pulling back slightly so she could look into her son's face. "I want to hear about everything, but we have plenty of time now. I'm home and I'm not going anywhere." The reassurance in her words seemed to settle something deep within Louis. He relaxed slightly in his mother's arms, though he continued to hold on to her tightly as if afraid she might disappear again if he let go. "Promise, Mummy? Promise you're really staying?" "I promise, my darling. I'm home now, and we're going to be together." Catherine's voice was firm and sure, carrying the kind of maternal authority that could soothe any childhood fear or uncertainty. Prince William had been watching the reunion with his own emotional response clearly visible on his face. Mitchell observed as the Prince of Wales wiped his eyes discreetly, obviously moved by seeing his wife and youngest son reconnected after the difficult weeks of separation. When Catherine looked up and saw her husband, her face lit up, with a different but equally powerful joy. "Hello, love," she said softly, and Prince William moved quickly to join his family, wrapping both his wife and son in an embrace that completed the family unit that had been incomplete for too long. As the royal family held each other in the entrance hall of Windsor Castle, Mitchell felt a profound sense of privilege at being present for such an intimate moment. This wasn't about royal protocol or ceremonial duties. This was about the fundamental human need for family connection and the powerful bonds that exist between parents and children. Louis continued to cling to his mother, occasionally pulling back to look at her face as if reassuring himself that she was really there, really home, really staying. Each time he did this, Catherine would smile and stroke his cheek or kiss his forehead, providing the constant physical reassurance that he so desperately needed. "Did you bring me anything, Mummy?" Louis asked suddenly, his natural childhood curiosity beginning to resurface now that his primary need for his mother's presence had been met. The question made both parents laugh, and Catherine reached into her bag to produce a small wrapped package. "Of course I did, darling. But first, let's go somewhere more comfortable, and you can tell me all about everything I missed while I was away." As the family began to move away from the entrance hall, Mitchell noticed that Louis positioned himself so that he could maintain constant physical contact with his mother, his small hand firmly grasping hers as they walked. The reunion had been everything that anyone could have hoped for, filled with genuine emotion and the kind of joy that only comes from family love. But Mitchell sensed that this was just the beginning of what would likely be an extended period of reconnection, as both mother and son worked to rebuild the daily intimacy that had been interrupted by their separation. The castle, which had felt somehow incomplete during Catherine's absence, finally felt whole again. The evening that followed Princess Catherine's return to Windsor Castle was unlike any other in recent memory. Guard Sergeant Mitchell had remained on duty throughout the afternoon and into the evening, and he witnessed firsthand the remarkable transformation that took place within the castle walls as the royal family reconnected after their lengthy separation. Prince Louis had not left his mother's side since the moment of their reunion. Even as Princess Catherine greeted Prince George and Princess Charlotte, who had returned from their afternoon activities to find their mother unexpectedly home, Louis maintained his position close to her, his small hand either holding hers or resting on her arm, as if ensuring she remained real and present. The reunion with the older children had been touching in its own way, though George and Charlotte, being older, had been able to express their emotions with more complexity and understanding. Prince George, at 11, had hugged his mother with the reserved affection of a boy beginning to understand the weight of royal responsibilities, while 9-year-old Princess Charlotte had been more openly emotional, crying happy tears as she shared stories of how much she had missed their mother's presence during bedtime routines and daily conversations. But it was Louis's reaction that continued to move everyone who witnessed it. The 5-year-old seemed determined to make up for every moment of separation by staying as close to his mother as physically possible. When the family moved to the private sitting room for tea, Louis positioned himself directly beside Catherine on the sofa, his small body pressed against hers, his stuffed lion forgotten on the floor for the first time in weeks. "Tell me about your lion, sweetheart," Catherine said gently, noticing the toy that had clearly been so important during her absence. "Did he take good care of you while Mummy was away?" Louis looked down at the stuffed animal with a mixture of gratitude and dismissal. "He was good, Mummy, but he wasn't you. He couldn't read stories the right way, and he couldn't make the scary dreams go away like you do." The simple honesty of his words brought fresh tears to Catherine's eyes, and she pulled him closer to her. "I'm so sorry I had to be away, darling. I know it was hard for you, and I wish things could have been different." Her voice carried the weight of maternal guilt that many mothers feel when circumstances force them to be separated from their children, regardless of how necessary or unavoidable those circumstances might be. Prince William joined the conversation, settling into the chair across from his wife and youngest son. "Louis was incredibly brave while you were away, Catherine. He missed you terribly, but he never stopped hoping you would come home. Every single day, he asked about you and looked for you. I asked if it was you, Mummy, Lewis added, his voice small but proud. Every time I heard cars or footsteps or voices, I asked if it was you coming home. And today, it finally was. The triumph in his voice was unmistakable, as if his persistence and hope had somehow made his mother's return possible. Mitchell, who had been discreetly observing the family interactions from his post in the corridor, found himself deeply moved by the child's simple faith. In Prince Louis's world, love and hope were powerful enough to bring about the outcomes he desired, and in this case his belief had been rewarded with the reunion he had longed for so desperately. As the evening progressed, the family's dinner was served in the private dining room, and Louis insisted on sitting directly beside his mother rather than in his usual place across the table. Catherine accommodated this request without hesitation, understanding that her son needed the constant reassurance of her physical presence to truly believe that the separation was over. During dinner, Louis chattered constantly, sharing every detail of the past 3 weeks with an urgency that suggested he was afraid his mother might disappear again before he could tell her everything. He told her about the new flowers the gardeners had planted, the books Miss Thompson had read to him, the games he had played with his siblings, and the dreams he had about her return. And Mummy, I kept your picture by my bed every night, and I told it good morning and good night just like I tell you when you're here. He reported seriously, as if this information was of the utmost importance. Papa said you could hear me even though you were far away, but I wasn't sure because the picture never talked back. Catherine's eyes filled with tears again as she listened to her son's innocent account of how he had tried to maintain their connection during her absence. Oh, sweetheart, I could hear you. Maybe not with my ears, but I could feel your love in my heart every single day. And I sent my love back to you the same way. The concept seemed to satisfy Louis completely, and he nodded with the serious acceptance that children often display when adults provide explanations for things that are beyond their full understanding but feel emotionally true. I felt it sometimes, Mummy, especially at bedtime when I was really missing you. It felt like warm hugs in my heart. After dinner, the family moved to the library for their evening reading time, a tradition that had been difficult to maintain during Catherine's absence. Louis immediately claimed the spot closest to his mother on the large reading sofa, and when she opened the first book, he insisted on helping her hold it, his small hands covering hers as if to ensure she couldn't let go. Mitchell observed that even the other family members seemed to benefit from Catherine's return in ways that went beyond their individual relationships with her. The family dynamic had been restored to its natural balance, and there was a sense of completeness that had been missing during her absence. Prince William appeared more relaxed than he had in weeks, and the older children seemed more settled and secure with their mother's presence anchoring their family unit once again. As bedtime approached, the real test of the day's reunion began. Prince Louis had struggled with bedtime routines throughout his mother's absence, often requiring extra attention and reassurance to settle down for the night. Tonight, he was clearly anxious about the possibility of waking up to find that his mother's return had been a dream. "Mummy, will you still be here when I wake up?" he asked as Catherine tucked him into bed, his voice carrying the vulnerability that often emerges in children during quiet nighttime moments. "I will be here when you wake up, and when you have breakfast, and when you play in the gardens, and when you have lunch," Catherine promised, her voice steady and reassuring. "I will be here for all of it, sweetheart. This is my home, and you are my family, and I'm not going anywhere." But Louis's anxiety persisted. But what if you have to go away again? What if there are more important things that need you somewhere else? The questions revealed the depth of his fear that this reunion might be temporary, that the security he felt in his mother's presence might be taken away again without warning. Catherine considered her response carefully, understanding that her words would need to provide genuine comfort while being honest about the realities of royal life. "Sometimes Mummy and Daddy do have to travel for our work, just like other mummies and daddies do, but I promise you that I will never be away for so long again without making sure you understand exactly what's happening and when I'll be back. And I promise that no matter where I am, you are always the most important thing in my heart." The reassurance seemed to ease some of Louis's anxiety, but he still had one more request. "Can I sleep with you tonight, Mummy? Just for tonight, so I know you're really here?" It was a request that under normal circumstances might have been gently redirected, but Catherine understood that this was not a normal circumstance.
Of course you can, darling.
Just for tonight. As she helped Louis gather his favorite stuffed animals and his pillow, Mitchell observed the profound relief that settled over the child's features. The physical proximity to his mother would provide the ultimate reassurance that she was truly home and safe. As the family settled in for the night, with Louis securely positioned between his parents and the master bedroom, the castle itself seemed to exhale a collective sigh of relief. The 3 weeks of separation had tested everyone involved, but the reunion had proven that the bonds of family love were strong enough to withstand the challenges that royal life sometimes imposed. Mitchell completed his evening rounds with a sense of satisfaction that went beyond his professional duties. He had witnessed something profound and beautiful in the simple reunion of a mother and her child, and he understood that he had been privileged to observe one of those moments that remind us all of what truly matters in life. The question, "Is that you, Mummy?" would no longer echo through the corridors of Windsor Castle with desperate hope. Instead, it had been answered definitively and completely, restoring peace and joy to a family that had endured separation with grace and had been rewarded with a reunion that strengthened their bonds even further. The castle walls had witnessed many historical moments, but perhaps none more touching than the simple return of a mother to the child who had never stopped believing she would come home.